It is bye-week time. That means it is Graham Couch time. What probability does Michigan State have to win their next few games? Aidan Chiles, are we going to bench him right now? And then, yes, Michigan State hoops shipping up to the UP. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Spartans is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe, and get ready for a chat with the one, the only Graham Couch, because there's no better time to talk to you, Graham, than on a bye week. I need a good mental health checkup right now. And Dr. Graham of the Lansing State Journal and Couch on the Roof podcast, you are here to sit me down in my chair and maybe bring me back down to reality. I'm not sure. Let's start actually with your most recent column over at lansingstatejournal.com, because you did a great piece over there, as you do, Graham. Just fantastic work. If I could just butter your biscuit one more time before we really get started. It was probabilities Michigan State has to win each of their next few games the rest of the season, right? However, over at kfordratings.com, we've mentioned them a few times on this show. They give Michigan State a 25% chance to beat Iowa. You doubled that, though.
Yeah.
Graham, you don't seem too bothered by what happened Friday night at Oregon. Thank you for that. And why 50% chance to win? I like what I'm hearing so far.
Well, it's a lot of what Iowa is, and it's a lot of having covered teams, covering Michigan State and other teams that have limitations offensively, and seeing what that does to games. Like, you can be the more seasoned program. You can have the better record. But really, if you don't have quarterback play in a passing game, like I use the 2012 Michigan State team as an example. That team was 1 year away. That team was coming off a Big Ten championship game appearance and one win away from the Rose Bowl. And they were a 6-6 team that was 5-6 going into their final game. That had a lot of NFL guys, but was banged up a little up front and didn't have quarterback play in the passing game, and it just limits you to such a degree. And so if you're Iowa, you're coming on the road to a Michigan State team coming off a bye that is going to be stepping down in competition after facing Ohio State and Oregon. You look at what Iowa's been and how they've won, and I don't see them running away from Michigan State. And so if you're talking about a game that's in Spartan Stadium where I think MSU's defense keeps them in it, I think MSU will be able to move the ball through the air. It's just going to be different than it was against Oregon and Ohio State. And I think in Spartan Stadium, it's a 50-50 proposition.
I needed to hear that because, as Oregon is just getting 8 yards, 9 runs per rush, my confidence meter was starting to dwindle about the Iowa game. I was thinking about the Iowa game the entire first half last Friday night, because the whole season, run defense has been a strength. And even against Ohio State, there was 3 explosive run plays in the first half, but it wasn't like they were biting off 7, 8, 9 yards per rush, just like Oregon did. But you kind of get the feeling that not just a step down in competition, but just the fact they're a little more, or I should say a lot more one-dimensional in Oregon really plays in Michigan State's hand here.
Yeah, they're quite a bit, and Oregon was better than Ohio State, I think, and that doesn't mean Oregon will be better than Ohio State when they play each other in a matchup, but they cause more problems for Michigan State. They cause more problems for Michigan State's defense. And I don't think Oregon's great at the quarterback position, but that running game was a real issue. And we've seen Iowa. We saw Iowa last year, a team that was similar to this in some regards. And obviously they had the Cade McNamara injury in the game that Michigan State was playing them. But that was a Michigan State team in a weird spot with an interim coach coming off. The news the night before that some of them had lost NIL deals, and they still arguably should have won that game, right? And I've seen Iowa play enough this year that I don't believe they're a better team than Michigan State. And some of what's happened to MSU right now is schedule based. They have played one of the tougher schedules in the country. They have played a schedule that reveals everything about you, every truth, good and bad. And that's, I don't know if that's healthier in the long run than, say, Indiana. Like, Indiana is the darling of college football right now, but Michigan State would also be 6-0 if they played Indiana's schedule. I don't know if they would have won as impressively. I don't know that they're as good as Indiana, but they'd be 6-0, and the conversation would be different. And so, I think we have to keep that in mind with this Michigan State team.
And moving forward here, someone had a really good mailbag question. By the way, if anyone ever has one, shehead_sports on Twitter or lockedonspartans@gmail.com. But Bernsey wrote in a question that I'm going to turn into another question here, Graham. They wrote in, am I wrong to be concerned MSU will be 3-7 after Illinois? I think State could beat Iowa or Illinois, but I'm worried. And just to refresh everyone's memory right now, it's Iowa, at Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois are your next 4 games. So the question on top of that, Graham, is it more likely MSU wins against Iowa or Michigan, or is it more likely that they actually do continue this skid and lose an additional 4 games against the 4 opponents that we just had?
Yeah, I don't think they go 0-4. That said, I think Iowa is a real pivot point in some ways because you're coming off a bye. You've got this reset. You're playing an opponent that's not the quality you played the last 2 weeks.
Thank God.
And you need confidence. And this is a chance to get it back. If you lose that at home at night to Iowa, I think there's a much better chance that they beat Michigan if they also beat Iowa. They need a little bit of swagger. They need to feel something about themselves a little bit. And they need Aidan Chiles to have a game where, I think what happened at the beginning of the Oregon game for Chiles, where he fumbles on that at the goal line on that first drive after the 4th and 2, where they completed a 44-yard pass to Nick Marsh. Obviously that was deflating to the entire team, certainly the fan base. Yeah. It was agitating. I think it bothered him too. And you could see him later in the game, I think almost overcorrecting, throwing balls away because that's what you're supposed to do to be safe when they might have needed him to try to make a play. And I think it was in his head a little bit. I think it bothered him. Look, he knows he can't fumble at the goal line. And so he needs to have a game where he feels good. And this team, I think, needs a game where they do. So to answer your question, it's hard to know. I would say it's more likely they win both Iowa and Michigan than they lose both slightly. That would be my argument. But it would be in the 50 percentile. I just think the teams that are coming up aren't out of their league. I understand why people are concerned. But so much of the way we feel about a team is opponent-driven. And when you look at Iowa, and they're a team that's thrown for less than 300 yards against power conference competition combined. This is not a passing game that's running away from you. When you look at a Michigan team that just has not had competent quarterback play and doesn't have headliners and pros to the degree they've had to really get, run away from you. When you look at Indiana that's playing with a lot of James Madison transfers and an Ohio University transfer at QB, and a heck of a coach. There are lots of lessons in the hire of Kurt Cignetti. A lot of ADs don't hire these guys earlier in their careers because they can't sell them to donors. If you're a donor right now, you got to look yourself in the face and stop wanting the splash press conference because there are a lot of these guys. Kalen DeBoer, who was at Alabama, now is at Washington, is one of these guys that's at the 1AA level or Division II level early on. These guys can coach. They probably need to move up the ladder faster. And they get overlooked, and schools like Florida wind up with the wrong coach 5 straight times, right? So, he's a great coach, but when you just look at their roster, that's not a better roster than Michigan State. You look at Illinois, I think it's a little more seasoned program, and they played a tough schedule themselves and played people close, but I don't think that's a better roster significantly than what MSU has. And I would, so if MSU loses confidence and gets banged up, they could lose all these games. But I think these are truly toss-ups, and ideally you don't lose every toss-up.
No question. And you know what? We're actually going to shift the conversation to something that me or you really haven't talked about a lot this season. It's quarterback Aidan Chiles. I don't know if you've ever gotten into writing about him or talking about him, but we're going to do that here in the second segment because, there's a lot to talk about. But first, you talk everyone's ears off about Game Time, the greatest ticketing app out there. And folks, I was at Comerica Park today. Absolutely electric for the first playoff game at home in a decade. Shout out to Game Time. Got a great deal on great seats thanks to their flash deals. Now, you've heard me talk about their flash deals all the time. If there's an event coming up a few weeks out Michigan State's homecoming game, go ahead, hop on the app, and you're going to find great deals at great spots, all thanks to their flash deals. Or, hey, guys, let's say you're listening to this on Thursday. Tigers' first pitch, 6:08. Not too late to get tickets, even if you're listening to this at 6 o'clock sharp. Their last-minute ticket deals on Game Time, second to none. Going back this week when I got the tickets, I was between two different seats, and this is what I like about Game Time. They give you an actual picture of your actual view before you buy the tickets. And best and easiest of all, it wasn't 15 clicks to get to the finish line after you're slapped with a bunch of fees. No. It was the upfront ticket price, 2 taps on my phone, tickets were sent straight there. So hop aboard on Game Time, whether it's for the homecoming game coming up or the next Tigers playoff game. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, guys, download Game Time, smash in promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's going to save you $20 off on your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, guys, what time is it? Well, you already know it. It's game time. And it's time to drag Graham Couch of Lansing State Journal and Couch of the Root podcast out here because, Graham, this mailbag question is going to set the table here. This is from Jay Dividia. I probably screwed up the pronunciation of that. Sorry about that. But the question was, how close are you to blackballing accounts that complain about Chiles every chance they get? Graham, I know that you interact with your listeners and your readers a whole bunch. I'm sure the volume of interaction that you get is much higher than the one we get here, Locked on Spartans. And I got to say, it's still a lot over here. Is the anti-Aidan Chiles rhetoric, while probably a minority crowd, is that loud minority just a thorn in your side? Because, I swear I'm going to lose it one of these days because has anyone watched Michigan State the last few years and understand, how high this kid's ceiling is? Before I keep yelling, I'll just let you take it away. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I'll take it one further. And look, he's got to get the turnover situation under control at times.
100%.
Last week was the worst one because the interceptions when he's trying to make a play when there's a lot on him, when you're down 2 receivers at Boston College, and you don't have a great running game, that's him trying to make a play as a young guy. That's understandable.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
What happened at Oregon, though, is stuff you can't make. That you get benched as a junior in high school for making that mistake in varsity, right? You got to protect the football, and you didn't need to do it. So but first of all, there's no other option. Number one, I mean, he was brought in to be the starter. He's being paid to be the starter. In the NIL and transfer portal world, like it or not, accountability is different. And if you decide to make that change at any point, not that they have somebody better than him, not that they should, you're potentially losing a guy, which I would also argue this. I think that Dan Lanning at Oregon would trade quarterbacks if he could.
Interesting.
I am not sure that Will Howard by the end of this season is a better quarterback for Ohio State. Now, maybe he is. He's a veteran guy. They got weapons. You don't need the world out of that arm. But when you need the world out of an arm and you need the world out of legs, Aidan Chiles has those abilities. Now, he's also a young guy who's got some mistake-prone just things in him. And if those are characteristics of who he is as a quarterback going forward, it will limit his career. It'll limit MSU. And eventually he might not be the guy. That is stuff that if that's innately what you are and not something that's just what you're trying to grow from, that's a big problem. But you're not in that phase yet. The whole point of getting a guy who's a true sophomore, who's got a load of talent with a program that's not ready to win yet, is that he grows with the program. He is facing such an uphill climb with this. I mean, he just doesn't have an offensive line. He has okay weapons around him, okay-ish, no line, and no running game. I don't know what people expect. Most quarterbacks look bad. There are a number of NFL quarterbacks who don't look good in these sort of scenarios. Most don't. And it's just hard to find these guys. And Michigan State has a guy who's different athletically and different with his ability to make plays than they've had in a long time, if ever, in this sort of package. And so the question is, can he begin to also understand you lose as many games as you win? And he's got to balance that. But he's going to always be a gunslinger. He's going to throw some interceptions. It just can't be this bad.
Understandable. And I'm glad you said all that too. And not just, to echo what we've been saying on the show, but it is certainly a thing that he really doesn't have a run game. And if anyone missed it earlier this week, I rattle off the stat after the Oregon game. Your 2 running backs combined for 14 carries, 43 yards. 42 of those yards were after contact. Not a lot of people are getting help on this offense. And understandable, it's a banged up offensive line. You're starting another guy at a new position, swinging ball over to right guard. it is very patchwork, but you need a playmaker on this offense. It has to be Chiles. At the same time, he's trying to learn how to not turn the ball over. And look, there are 6 games left in the season, of course, and I need to make it clear, I'm not thrilled with the turnovers too. There is growth. For the next question, Matt C. wrote in, I've made my stance on Chiles clear. I need a 4-2 record, 10 TDs, no more than 3 interceptions, and no more fumbles, or I bring in another quarterback to push him next year. I also want to wake up at 6'10" too, Matt C. That seems lofty, but for me or for you, Graham, like, what do you need to see from Chiles these last 6 games? I just need to see continued good decision-making with passing the ball. He didn't really put it in that much trouble against Ohio State and Oregon, based on just decision making. That interception against Ohio State, bad throw. That's still not good, but it's at least we're learning something between the ears. I just need to see that continue for the rest of the season. What is it for you? Is it a certain stat? Is it something off the box score? What is it that you need to see from him?
Yeah, well, I know Jebediah and Matt C. I know 2 of your
hey, let's go. That's what I'm talking about.
And I know their opinions on Chiles, and they're very different. Look, to me, he needs to make more plays than he doesn't, right? And you need to start seeing that more often. What it looked like at Maryland was a guy who, he had a couple of errors in that game, but he also had just some massive throws. I mean, the 57-yard throw to Nick Marsh, not the 76-yard touchdown, but the one where he was getting hit, is one of the best throws you'll see. He had a 25-yard out against Ohio State to Marsh. It was really good. So
amazing.
So what you do realize, he needs Marsh healthy. Like, that is a guy who's a difference maker. They go to on 4th down, on a 4th and short, willing to throw it to that guy. So he needs to have that level playmaker, number one. But what you need to see is the turnovers need to drop, and turnovers in critical situations need to drop. He's going to throw some interceptions, but you need to see him start to hang on to the ball, protect the ball, continuously make better decisions, and then continue to have moments, though, because ultimately what makes him potentially special is that he is a playmaker. He is a gamer. He is somebody who can elevate, I think, an offense because he's difficult to defend. And, I mean, you think about what Maryland coach Michael Oxley said before that game, that they were going to make Aidan Chiles beat them with his arm, and he did.
Yeah.
And I wonder right now to scout on him, because I think the idea is to rattle him, to get him to put pressure on him, to try to make him make decisions that aren't great. But so they need him to have some games where things go well and there's just promise. He's going to be the starting quarterback next year. And ideally by the end of this year, it would look and feel better than it does right now. But they're not going to play Oregon and Ohio State back to back again. They're not going to play those.
I hope not. Yeah.
Like if they had played Indiana's schedule, he would have thrown a couple interceptions, but he would be the toast of the world right now.
Yes.
And that's the thing. This is so schedule dependent. And that's, I think, in the long run, probably good. Maybe it's not. I mean, you can lose confidence and never get it back, but it's probably good to know where you are, know where your flaws are. And you're talking about a guy who you want as a junior and senior to give you a chance to contend and elevate you in ways that you haven't had.
That's the thing, not to, turn this whole season into a preseason, but you really want to hit the ground running starting next year. And I know no one wants to hear that, especially after back-to-back bowl gameless seasons. Like, how much more patience do people have? But really, it's all part of the process, whether, people want to hear it or not. But yeah, really quick, speaking of, just being schedule dependent, Graham, in the history of mankind, has a bye week ever come at a better time for a team? Because this seems to be a godsend right now for our boys.
No, 100%. And if they were, it's the way the schedule's set up. In a lot of ways, yes, Oregon on the road 6 days after Ohio State was brutal.
Not
but
great.
You would rather that, get it out of the way, than be coming back from that at Oregon and just go down the same slump you were in. The schedule sets up, at least they're difficult games. They're not games that are automatic. You don't have Purdue coming up here, but there's still games where you have a chance in. And so you have a chance to build confidence, to build into the back half of this season, to get to a bowl game, which I think should be the rallying cry. And you've got to find a way to win 2 of the 5 toss-ups. That's it, because you're going to beat Purdue. Purdue's awful. And you didn't luck out with UCLA or Northwestern on your schedule, so you get Purdue. That's your one. And you got to win 2 of the other 5. And I think they're more than capable of doing that. But I do think Iowa's a biggie. I just think this has a chance to not snowball like spiral, but if they become a team that can't quite get it done late in games, or there's always something, and it happens again. We've seen that team. We've seen the way that goes. They need a late game situation to go well for them again.
No question. And, we're going to switch sports here at the other side of this break. We're going to talk basketball because the season's starting on Sunday. How about that over in Northern Michigan? But first, need to talk to people's ears off about FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And yes, Michigan State on a bye, just like we talked about, but no shortage of bangers of football games coming up this Saturday. Holy smokes. Just any shortage of them whatsoever? Absolutely not. I seem to like Oregon. +3 right now, as things stand right now, subject to change, of course, on FanDuel. But I think the trenches over there, over in Eugene, will beat Ohio State. Come follow me, or come tail me, come fade me. Do whatever you want to do. Do it over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And, well, hey, for the Sunday fans out there, yes, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, guys. That is over at FanDuel.com. America's #1 sportsbook. Again, FanDuel.com. And let's drag them back out here for one more segment. We're talking shooty hoops because, well, our Michigan State Spartans taking on Northern Michigan scrimmage. Big Ten Network, Bill Raftery on the call, Lisa Byington. What a great duo to have for this game. But Graham, this isn't just like a cutesy scrimmage for us fans that are nose deep in the world of MSU basketball. The Spartans have about 11 question marks going into the season. Which one are you looking forward to getting an answer on the most, despite it being much lesser competition? Because for me, how do the big men look? Because Northern Michigan, they only got 2 guys that are 6'8" or taller. If your trio of big men don't look substantially more dominant than them, I think it's already, even before the season technically starts, to start maybe hitting the panic button. Am I just too scared, Graham, or what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, it depends how they play them. I used to cover JUCO basketball way back in the day. And,
okay.
The national tournament level JUCO basketball, and you get guys like I remember covering a guy by the name of Aaron Spears who played at St. John's in Illinois and then St. John's, and
okay,
he would 6'10", soft hands, but he would play guys who were 6'5" during the regular season and struggle because you're just not used to having dudes on your kidneys. It's
okay.
Like, what is this? So there can be an uncomfortability when you're playing people that are just such a levels and size down. If you're a big, you just don't like it. You're not used to it. That said, you're right. That you should see, but I don't know that like Jackson Kohler going for 20 points at Northern Michigan says that Jackson Kohler will do that when it matters.
Totally.
or have it. I think I'm still very curious about the Cohen Carr, Xavier Booker, and even Jackson Kohler dynamic is wings, is 4-5s, how they're going to use these guys. I know a year ago they liked the idea of Booker and Kohler together. Kohler had the injury. They never really got to see it. Booker wasn't really ready.
Yep.
Are they going to go to that at any point? And what's that going to look like? I want to see – what I want to see is combinations that work. I want to see lineups that seem to have a little more juice to them than others and get a feel for them. Because I think there are a lot of questions about what things are going to look like. I think what happened in the final game in Spain, where they had Xavier Booker at the 5 and Cohen Carr at the 4, and that was really effective. It could be something you see as a closing lineup, because you can do the math on the guards that are going to be in the game. Jeremy Fears Jr., Jaden Akins, maybe Trey Holloman, maybe Frankie Fiddler. Like, how many people are left? In other words, Booker is going to play the 4. But late in games, if he's going to be on the court, the best lineup may have him at the 5. So how often do we see that? I've had a couple coaches who don't coach Michigan State text me about what they've seen from Carr, and especially what they saw in those overseas matchups. Like, that guy has to be on the floor if he's that guy. Now, where does he play? And how does that stuff all look together? And if he's playing the 3, does the lineup have enough shooting to work?
Right.
And it does if you got Xavier Booker out there. He's a great shooter, right? So you can't have him, and and if you do have him and Kohler and somebody else, what does that look like? And so these are all things that. So I think it's combinations. What looks smooth, what doesn't, because I think you can get a feel for that even against lower level competition. So that's the primary thing I'm looking for.
And obviously, there's a lot of cool events going on up there, or just the whole thing is just chock full of headlines, right? That's why you're going up there, Graham. You have to get a piece of those headlines. But for me, there's nothing more fascinating, or dare I say shocking, than the news that dropped, as we're recording, it happened today. Gordy LeDuc, I think I'm saying his name right. He was Tom Izzo's high school coach back in 1972. He's going to be on the bench for Michigan State for the scrimmage on Sunday. Is that not to make it morbid, but is that the most shocking thing that, hey, this guy's still walking around the earth and he's going to be on the bench Sunday for Michigan State? Like, what a cool, again, if not outright shocking story that, my goodness gracious, Izzo's high school coach?
Yeah, I hope nobody dives into the bench. It feels like it could be it was interesting. I was doing some research on some of Izzo's time up there, and for a column I may write here, and there was what I loved is the way he was covered. So I think it was the Iron Mountain Daily News. Make sure I've got this correct.
Okay.
But, if I could pull this up quickly. Yes. Okay, this is a quote from it's the Escanaba Daily Press. Sorry.
Okay.
And this is on March 19, 1973, when Izzo was in high school. They were tough on these kids. So the guy writes, this is a paragraph. A key to the Mountaineers' downfall was the inept performance of guard Tom Izzo in the decisive second half. And all UP and all tourney picked the last 2 years, the 5'8" guard fell apart in the fourth quarter and took numerous poor shots while trying to get his teammates back in the lead all by himself. The Mountaineers won on team play this year, and Izzo abandoned that strategy when it was needed most. Izzo had only 22 field goals. You wonder why he gets frustrated with A.J. Hoggard? Because it was A.J. Hoggard, it turns out. That's so yeah, there's that,
Oh my God, that's insane. Well, because I used to do high school sports coverage back in the day, first job out of college, and not my wildest dreams when I think of skewering a high school kid like that. I got a hard enough time doing it with college kids that now get paid six figures, Graham. Like, that's, wow, they don't play in the UP. They say things are different up there. I didn't know they were that different.
I did write once. This is bad. I probably shouldn't share this, but when I was late in my tenure in Freeport, Illinois, right before I left, I think I already had the next job already, and I was covering a small school girls basketball game, and the team that I was covering was playing a better team that had a really good center, and she was fantastic. She was the reason that team was winning. But they also had this little redheaded point guard who at one point when they were way ahead blew on her fingernails and then drove by. Really pompous move, right?
Sure.
I would have clubbed you if I was playing against you. And I wrote in the story, she blew on her fingernails as if she was the reason they were winning. And really flying. And apparently she was in tears. Her mother was upset. We got lots of calls. It was time for me to leave the world of prep girls basketball coverage. But anyway, we all make
my God. I got nothing that can come close to topping that story. That's sensational. Not to say that we never got complaints over at the Port Huron Times-Herald when I wrote up there, but you made it count. You made it. You lit the dynamite. You threw it in the room and you shut the door on your way out to the next job. I absolutely love that. Really quick, just to get this thought out there, because speaking of the world of writing at Michigan State, they come out with this press release on their website, MSUSpartans.com, that, hey, Izzo's high school coach, he's going to be on the bench. They mentioned, within the first three paragraphs, that, yes, back in that 1972 game, it's a famous story. Many Spartans have heard it by now. Izzo missed a free throw that would have tied the game with 2 seconds left. That is so storied that even 50 years later, it's still making the front of a press release. So, Graham, my thought is here, is that missed free throw 52 years ago the single greatest thing that's ever happened to Michigan State University as an institution? Because ever since that miss, it's given him an edge. It's given him a chip on his shoulder. It's given him a journey to find perfection. And we are now in the throes of a 5-decade-long, redemption tour or revenge tour. I think if he makes that free throw, we're not talking about, 8 banners in the last 20-some years. We're not talking about Mr. Final Four himself. I think the free throw was the best thing that's ever happened to Michigan State. You like that? Is that a good take?
It's a good question to ask him, and maybe I will, because I do wonder if how much there are moments in that, we all have those things, and that's one that's been shared over and over. And obviously, there might be others too, but there's no doubt if that sort of chasing, this is what held you back, you better fix it. And the accountability that comes with that, and which has really become a staple for him. But I would say that I read that paragraph from a year later. So a year later, he was still taking bad shots and shooting his team out of games. So
that is so crazy. Oh my God. I think that's the hardest I've laughed on the show. that is so funny. Oh my God. But yeah, ask Izzo about that and tell him that I asked the question. He has no clue who I am. But if you don't mind passing that along from his good friend Matt, that'd be much appreciated.
I bet you he does know who you are.
There's not a chance, not a snowball's chance, and you know what. But you know what, Graham, you are going up to the UP. Do you need anything from people? Do you need like suggestions? Do you need your email inbox blown up with, what to do in the UP, or are you a pretty seasoned veteran up there?
Yeah, Marquette is the happy place for me and my wife. We go up there all the time. It'll be a second time this year. We're good. We know we've got a plan down. We're going up Thursday morning. We're good. So that's
what I'm talking about. All right, so everyone reach out to Graham if you guys need advice. Then I just want to flood your inbox as much as possible. But no, Graham, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for, acting as a mental health doctor, so to speak, here during this bye week, because I need it. I know a lot of other listeners and viewers need it. So thanks a lot, man. You are truly the best. And guys, you are also the best out there, the viewers, the listeners of Locked On Spartans. You already know it. We're going to be back tomorrow. We do this 5 days a week right here at Locked On Spartans, the Locked On Podcast Network. Love you all. Go Green.